parents and families would know that there's a referral made to the Family Resource Program. You'll see a couple of names at the bottom of that page, Megan Landis and Megan Barhorst. They are obviously ESC employees, and this is supplemental. It's a supplement to the work that Ashley Van Ness does as our attendance officer, and Scott Auxier.
Yes.
Okay. Make sure that I pronounce that correctly. So it's a really great opportunity for us. They are concentrating on just 3 school districts now: us, Piqua, and Covington. Our chronic absenteeism is highest. It's on the high side for the county. So again, the resources are being directed towards those 3 school districts, ours included, that are struggling the most with that issue right now.
What did you say again?
Piqua, Covington, and us.
It's the pilot year for them too.
Correct. Yep. And this is something that office staff, so school counselor, social worker, administrator, would make a referral to this team. It wouldn't just be from any school employee, but it would be from the office or student support services. And so far, since the beginning of the school year, this team has received 17 referrals. Now, those are not all just Milton Union referrals, and that's why they want to make sure that the circle is small on who can actually submit those referrals. So
we're already engaging with these services? We
are already engaging with these services, yes.
You mentioned resources. What kind of resources would they give to the family, or what would that look like?
So, what are you giggling about?
Sorry.
Anyway, so Katie gives me a hard time,
Sorry,
obviously.
and was it you?
Behavioral support, behavioral coaching. So if there are students that are having difficulties doing school the way we want them to, and perhaps those behaviors are being exhibited at home too, this is the team that can help do that. Bridge the communication gap between school and home to make sure that what's being done at school is also reinforced at home. It's also a step before juvenile court, so there are often some resources that go along with ending up in the truancy cycle. So this is to try to get those resources to families prior to when it's super high stakes. This could also be students that need help with transportation. It could be a homeless issue for the family dealing with a homelessness issue. You might take a look at those bulleted items in the middle of the page. This could also be home visits. So there's, we are able to do a lot with our students and families while during the school day, but one thing that we haven't engaged in a lot of, or any at all, would be home visits. So these are folks that are able to visit homes if they think that would be beneficial to the student and family.
Correct me if I'm wrong, don't a lot of larger schools have social workers that actually make home visits?
Well, a lot of larger school districts have a number of social workers. There are folks that do work in terms of family community relations, so there are extra supports. I don't know that I have the expertise or knowledge of how many home visits, or whether there's a difference between rural or small school districts and suburban and urban school districts of the number of home visits that are made. The likelihood certainly is greater because those districts employ more social workers, which we could probably add a social worker to our staff and put that person to work immediately. And their caseload would be full. We could probably add a Samaritan behavioral health therapist, and that individual's caseload would be full. So I hope I answered your question.
You did.
Any other questions on Family Resource Coordinator? There's nothing really for the board to approve because there's no cost. I just think it's important for the board to be aware.
Did they get a grant or something?
They did. They did. I'm not sure exactly what grant program it is, but they did get a grant to fund all of this for the first year. They are trying to demonstrate that this is necessary and needed. So moving forward, perhaps if they couldn't maintain the grant or grant funding is no longer available, they would go to school districts and say, if you want to participate in this, then there would be a fee.
It was through the Department of Job and Family Services is who was kind of coordinating it up at the state level. Just a tidbit.
Okay.
Okay. I also put, these are a little bit random, the examples from different boards of education throughout the state regarding public participation at board meetings. So the top page or two is our policy 0169.1. So that's our bylaw for public participation at board meetings. And just a reminder that we get this through Neola. But if you flip the page, page 3, you have an example from Parma City Schools. Because when I was there, I remember there was a form that folks that were in attendance at board meetings filled out to be able to participate in the public participation portion of the meeting. You'll notice in the first full paragraph it says, download and completely fill out the request to be heard form. And those forms are to be submitted to the board secretary prior to the start of the Board of Education meeting. So people that were interested in speaking during the public participation portion of the meeting would fill out these forms and they would submit them the same night at the meeting itself. And it's difficult to see, but on the back of, I think it's the 4th page, you kind of get the idea of what the request to be heard form looks like. The next set is from Centerville, and I'm just going to, later on you can take a look at all of these and reflect on them, but the next page or two is from Centerville, and if you look at letter C, a little bit more than halfway down from the middle of the page, attendees must register their intention to participate in the public participation portion of the meeting in writing prior to the board meeting. A sign-up sheet for public participation will be available 30 minutes prior to each meeting. So just giving you examples of how folks identify that they want to be heard. The next page that looks like it's an eye test is from Dublin City Schools. Just food for thought for the board. Dublin has two board meetings a month. One is a work session, and you can see that it's open engagement and conversation. So that meeting in the month is more of a question and answer format between the board and the people in attendance. And then the second meeting of the month is a business meeting. And they also have a Google Doc that, similar to Parma City Schools, they have a Google Doc for public participation. And they, throughout all of these, there is, some boards of education allow 3 minutes for a community member to speak, some are 5. Some put a 30-minute time limit on the total amount of time that would be available for public participation. And so getting back to Dublin, on the next page, you'll see number 3 on their public participation form. It says, any person wishing to participate shall register at least 12 hours in advance. Heath Schools, it's a pretty short bylaw there, but in that large paragraph right in the middle, you'll notice that there are, for their Board of Education meetings, there are 2 opportunities for public participation at meetings. The first, towards the beginning of the meeting, comments are limited to agenda items only, and the second is towards the end of the meeting. Public participation is not restricted to agenda items during that time. And then the last that I just submit to the board, food for thought as you're thinking through if you want to do anything with that particular bylaw, especially since we haven't scheduled our meeting with Norm for the fall update of all of our policies. This is something that we can look at. The last is from Madison Local, And starting there with letter A, any person or group wishing to place an item on the agenda shall register their intent with the superintendent no later than 7 days prior to the meeting. And you'll see that there's a list of information, there's a list of information that should be included in that request. So I offer this is a pretty stringent public participation bylaw. I mean, 7 days in advance is pretty strict. But just kind of offering to the board the array of what this looks like for different school districts across the state, kind of randomly, larger school districts, smaller school districts, ones that Madison's a lot like us. If you have questions, if there's things that you'd like me to research, I'm happy to do that. Maybe in another meeting or two, we want to, or maybe the next meeting, or maybe even tonight, we talk about how you might like that public participation portion of the meeting to look.
I kind of like Heath, where the first part is items on the agenda to discuss, and then at the end, or close to the end, giving maybe a shorter amount of time for response to discussions during the meeting, so we don't have interruption. If we have an interruption during the meeting, we can say, hold your question until the end during that part of the public participation. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Many times during the meeting, when people are sitting out there, you come up with a question and you want to ask it. So that would give them a really good way to reach out. I don't know how you guys feel, but I don't feel very strongly about having to fill out a form prior to the meeting. I know schedules are hectic for many people, and sometimes you're hoping you can get there and you're not sure, and if you can make it, it's great. So I don't mind people last minute deciding to speak, but if they would like to fill out a form and write their question down ahead of time, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, 7 days is kind of crazy. I think anything before the meeting might be unnecessary, but I do feel like since we're going to start filming our meetings, this might be like a good point to just kind of revisit this, make sure people speak, the public that's watching knows who's speaking, and so we may have to have a microphone up there. I don't know. But it could be.
Tom's nodding his head.
Yes. It could be a good time to just revisit what we like and don't like. It doesn't come up very much, but having like a time, like some of them, it's like an hour, but it might just be good to have that in place.
Yeah, I think still have a time limit.
Because we don't have a time limit, right?
I don't believe so.
That's 3 minutes.
No,
A total time.
Total.
Oh,
Like a
for
30-minute.
the entire public participation. Gotcha. That makes sense.
And Heath has 30 minutes, probably, for the first half and the second half.
Combined.
Yeah.
For 30 minutes each.
No, not 30 minutes each. 3 minutes each person, and then the 30 minutes, I think, in the first half and 30 minutes for the second half.
So basically 10 people.
If they use the Unless full there's 3 minutes.
But like tonight, we don't have any questions.
So maybe we can review it and everybody think about it and have like a discussion next meeting? I mean, I did read this ahead of time, but I know sometimes I wouldn't have read these things, so you may not have even thought about it yet.
Okay, we'll maybe make that a discussion item for the October meeting. And so unless the board has any questions for me, I'm going to swing this to Katie Hartley so she can talk about the local report card release for Milton Union.
So I'm going to do kind of a very broad overview. I want to talk about all of the components, but also just as a reminder, and I'll point this out with each component. Some of these components are a reflection of just the 23-24 school year. while some of them are a combination of multiple school years, and some are even represent school years that are 2 years in the past. So our overall rating was 3.5 stars. That is 0.5 less than we were at this time last year. I don't know if you remember this, a couple months ago we talked about preliminary results, and we were anticipating that we were going to be a little bit lower than last year at this time. So the components: achievement, that is just a representation of the 23-24 school year. And essentially that one is calculated based on the percentage of our students who perform in each of the categories or score ranges on state tests. So, the percentage of kids that are proficient earn a point, percentage of students who are score accomplished earn us 1.1, and so on. And so that's how that achievement component is calculated. And you'll see that for the district, we were 3 stars out of 5 this year on that. The progress component, can you scroll up just a little bit? The progress component, that essentially also looks at state test scores. However, that is a component that is a 3-year average. So you're looking at 24, 23, and 22 averaged. And that essentially measures, are our students performing near or at about the same performance level as they did the year before? So in other words, are students maintaining their achievement level? And you'll see that on that component, we are 3 stars out of 5 this year as well. Gap closing, that is a 1-year measurement, so that does represent the 23-24 school year. That measurement alone has well over 24 different components that make that up. Some of those include things like chronic absenteeism, things like gifted performance, so performance of our gifted students, performance of subgroups like students with disabilities. So lots and lots of things that go into the gap closing component. And you'll see on that one that we also on that earned a 3 stars out of 5. Our graduation component, this is one that actually doesn't represent the 23-24 school year at all. It represents 22-23 and 21-22, and that's on a 60-40, so 60% of the score is on 22-23. And you can see that we had a 96.8% graduation rate for our 4-year average and 91.3% for our 5-year average. So on that component this year we were at a 4 stars out of 5. And the last component that gets rated is early literacy. And 2 of the 3 components here just represent the 23-24 school year. The 3rd grade reading proficiency percent is a measure of the percentage of our students who were proficient or higher on the 3rd grade reading test either last fall or in the spring. That promotion to 4th grade is the percentage of students who were 3rd graders last year who were promoted to 4th grade. It's the improving K-3 literacy component that is actually a representation of 2 different years' worth of information. And essentially that one is looking at students who are not on track in their reading. Are we able to move them to on track by the same time the next fall? And you'll see that we got a 3 stars out of 5 on that component as well. The 6th and final component, college, career, workforce, and military readiness. This is the last year that the state is not going to assign a rating for that. And you can see that we had 78.6% of our students. And essentially this one is also in arrears. So you are looking at the percentage of students, and they can qualify for being or show their readiness in a variety of ways. Some of those are, for example, being remediation free on either the ACT or SAT. They can earn an industry credential. They can earn a certain number of AP test scores. So there are lots of ways for kids to show that they are ready for either college or the military or the workforce. So next year at this time, we will have a rating for that as well. And as always, if anybody wants me to go into more detail on any of this, I'm more than happy.
She would love to.
Katie, did you say at the very beginning you thought that these scores would be lower? And
We anticipated that actually back in May, as early as May, we started to see some of the results come in from some of the state tests. We obviously knew the graduation rates for the classes that were 2 years behind. The newest piece that we didn't know where that was going to end up is that progress piece. So our 3-year average and growing kids academically, are they maintaining their achievement levels? But no,
So are you saying that because of the kids, the group of kids that were coming up? Is that why you thought the scores would be
No,
lower?
just like seeing, so we were able in May to start seeing like what percentage of our third graders were proficient in reading, what percentage of our students in 7th grade math were proficient or accomplished or advanced. We already knew things like one of the, several of the gap closing components have to do with identification of students identified as gifted and whether or not we were providing services to them. So we already knew some of that data. So we knew that some of those, especially the achievement measures, were going to be a little bit lower than they had been the year before. So that's why we were anticipating that the overall report card would go down a little bit.
I have a question real
that-
quick. Do we control, or does the state control when the students take the test in the fall?
The state sets a state test window, and then within that, our district chooses a window. So, for example, you asked about the fall. In the fall, the state gives us a 3-week testing window. So all kids in the state of Ohio have to take that third grade reading test somewhere in that 3-week period. But your district has to identify 5 consecutive school days in which we administer the test. So we have to pick the 5 days. Yep.
I was going through the report cards for all the Miami County schools last night, and there seems to be, the scores seems to be tied to the percentage of economically disadvantaged.
Yes. Correct.
And we seem to be
Yes.
aligned with all the schools that are
Yes.
percentage-wise are very similar to our
Correct.
percentage of economically disadvantaged.
Yeah.
Does the state give any credence to the fact that, there is, I don't want to say it's more difficult to educate, but there is some roadblocks there?
So the answer primarily to your question is no. They don't make any allowances in most of these categories. The expectation for, in gap closing for chronic absenteeism, that's a standard that's set for every district and every school in the state of Ohio. Same with achievement. The one that doesn't necessarily calculate for any type of advantage or disadvantage is the progress score. And that simply is because each child is compared to themselves. So if you were a 5th grader last year, that means you were a 4th grader the year before. So we're going to look at how you performed on the 4th grade math test. And then when you took the 5th grade math test, did you perform around the same performance level? And we expect that kids maintain that performance level. And so since children act as their own control in that model, it does factor out some of those socioeconomic factors in that. So that's really the only component up there that I would feel comfortable saying it's not really calculated in, but it is not necessarily because every child serves as their own control. It's not as much of a factor there. That's a good question. But yes, you're correct. If we did a scatter plot and calculated the correlation coefficient, there is a strong correlation between socioeconomic status and achievement, and has been for decades.
So what are we going to do differently this year?
Well, that's a great question. We are working, our admin team, actually quite a bit over the summer, and recently are working to finalize the district's improvement plan for the year. So probably shouldn't speak too broadly yet because that team hasn't finalized it, but I do feel comfortable saying that there are 3 major goals, one around literacy, one around behavior, attendance, supports in those areas, and then a goal in math. And then under each goal, there'll be strategies and steps, and I think right now, currently, it's a 13-page plan.
The absenteeism, has that been increasing since COVID? Was that a byproduct? I know we mentioned it last year. I remember it coming up.
Yeah, so at the state level, yes, and for us, definitely, huge spike in the percentage of students who are chronically absent, both at Milton and in the state during COVID. The state has made some minimal declines in that percentage. So at the state level, the percentage of students who are chronically absent is going down by small amounts. Unfortunately, over the last 2 years, we've actually seen our chronic absenteeism percent increase by small amounts each year. So we are trending in the opposite direction of the state and in the opposite direction of where we would like
Do
to
you
be.
know, is it all across the board, all grade levels, or are we seeing it more in like,
Oh,
is it increasing in the elementary? Is it?
We would probably have to drill down.
yeah,
on
I'd
that
have to
too.
drill down. I don't remember any of that jumping out at me though when I was going through, but I'm not sure.
Percentage of our kids that have missed 10% of days that the school is in session,
Yeah. So about 18
about 18 days.
school days.
And, I don't know, we're probably putting things together that don't belong together, but when, coming out of the pandemic, we were communicating to parents and families that, hey, if your kid's sick, don't send them to school. I mean, we have a lot of folks that would, if it got the sniffles, little cough, would send their kids to school, and, we spent a lot of time talking about, don't send them to school. And the further we get away from 2020, 2021, it's now we're back to, all right, so you come to school and you're just not, feeling like school's your thing that day for the days that you really don't feel well and need to stay home. Because I think a lot of our folks will not take their children to the doctor, for the flu or a cold. And they're waiting for kids to get better, and all those days count. I mean, it just comes down to, in the state, the way they look at these,
Yeah.
they look at attendance, it's either here or not here. That's it. So, parents and families might have a really good reason, but for us, in our reporting, the kid's either here or not.
And it's tied to school funding too, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we need to account for all of our students. So just for example, I mean, if we have a student on home instruction due to a medical condition, then we need to make sure that we've got the proper paperwork just in case we would be audited by the state. We have to be able to account for our students.
Well, I mean, I think it's good timing to have
Yes.
this service available, and if it does not, I mean, we need to get kids in the seats.
Yeah.
Does make it easier to do teaching and learning.
Yep.
Our teachers say that a lot. So long as our students attend, we can help them. So they're going to make it. If they show up and they try, we're going to work with them. So we haven't, I mean, there are things that we can do, but when kids aren't attending, but we don't really have a formula for that. What we have a formula for is when kids are here, our folks will work really hard to make sure they're successful. There was a few years ago, I think there was a bill working its way through the Ohio General Assembly about the local report card, and that, maybe there was a different model that would help community members and families consider whether or not their school district and school buildings were doing good work. And it involved a comparison with similar districts. And I don't think that particular piece of legislation ever grew legs and was considered, for any kind of a vote. But, it would be nice to, you did Miami County, but it would be also nice to compare across the state. The state has a calculation, has a way through their metrics of figuring out who our similar districts are. It's interesting. It would be interesting to see how those school districts have performed on the report card this year. And by similar, it's similar valuation, size of staff, student enrollment,
Economic.
socioeconomic factors, free reduced lunch. So, I mean, every once in a while you hear people say, well, why aren't we competing with Tip City, or why aren't we competing with Miami East academically? We want to be like that. And the answer to that is it's a completely different place. It's a completely different place.
All you gotta do is go to look at the socioeconomic statuses of those schools, and it's drastically different. Drastically different.
Yep.
But I don't want to say that's why.
Well, it's not,
Like-
but it's a contributing factor, and it's something that needs to be pointed out.
But there's always something that we could do to do different. Katie, have we thought about in the elementary grades? So we have 3 different learners: the visual, auditory learners, kinesthetic learners. Like having our elementary teachers a standard that the kids are really struggling with, have the gym teacher or the art teacher gear a lesson towards that. And I would not want to overwhelm like the gym or art teacher or music teacher with that. But if we could just maybe have each grade do one standard that's really hard, and every year filter one in, and eventually we'll get them all covered. And the classroom teacher could also give an example to the art teacher, and maybe something that would work. I'm just trying to figure out different ways to cover.
So I don't think we do anything that's kind of cross-curricular like that. One thing that we have done, we've been going down the road towards improving literacy K-12 for all teachers, all students in all classes. And it is the expectation, so explicit vocabulary instruction was the first component that we chose to address in terms of professional development and expectation of instruction. And that absolutely included every art teacher, every PE teacher, every health teacher, that, vocabulary instruction can and should be happening in every class every day, that there is, a routine for teaching vocabulary. And we know through research that increased vocabularies in any area helps build stronger readers and helps with comprehension. So I don't think that we're probably doing what I think you're kind of getting at, which is maybe something along the lines of like, hey, in history we're studying ancient Egypt, and in art we're doing a project that's like a
Yeah, I mean, it could be
that's
something
related to
like
that. Is that
or
what you were?
Or just fractions. Let's just keep it basic and just say fractions. And, let's just use art for an example. And the teacher could say, hey, in December, we're going to be working on fractions. Could you maybe work on this with the kids and give them examples? So I'm not saying it has to be real detailed, but maybe kids who are struggling in math with fractions would connect while drawing or painting.
Sure. Yeah, making those connections
and
across
I don't
subjects.
think it has to be something hard. We don't want that. Just something kind of simple, maybe just a good stepping stone to try.
Yep, definitely worth considering.
Well, I feel like we should be clear right now that, there are factors, there are variables that affect communities, and there are variables that affect students in terms of assessment performance. But, I mean, we expected to do better on the report card this year. We have done better in the past. As recently as 23-24, I mean, we were really happy with our report card results, and got a momentum award, recognition from the state. We really felt like we were on the way. So if we doubled down on some of the things that we had done in 22-23 to get those results last year at this time, we thought if we continue to do those things, we're going to continue to go in the right direction. And for whatever reason, we all just kind of scratched our heads because we felt it wasn't what we expected. So, just because there are variables and factors that affect children and families and assessment performance doesn't mean we're not working to try to get better. I mean, we want to get better. We think we can do better than this, and we have. So, questions for?
I have one more question. So on the actual test, when it's taken in the fall, does that set the benchmark for the student?
Mm-mm.
So what are they comparing this to get if that child?
Are you talking about the
He's probably
progress
talking about
component?
two different things. He's probably, I think he might be talking about early literacy too, with the diagnostic result.
Oh, could be. So I think,
So does the fall and the test in the spring go towards the 4-star, 3-star ranking?
yes, so if you're talking about third grade reading proficiency, that 68.2%, yes, there could be a student who takes the third grade reading test in October and scores proficient, and then they turn around and take not the same test, but the third grade ELA test in the spring and are basic, so below proficient. They still count in our data as proficient. So if they hit proficient or higher one of the 2 times, doesn't matter which one, they do count in that percentage. Was that the question you were asking?
But the progress would probably be negative for that.
So progress, third grade is not included in progress. So progress would be from a state test 1 year to the state test the
Okay.
next year. So like a 4th grader taking a 4th grade math test, and then the next year taking a 5th grade math test. And there's all kinds of statistics behind it, but essentially, do you perform at the same level compared to the 130,000 kids in the state of Ohio? Did you maintain your place in
So
line?
in the fall, let's just use the 3rd grade for an example.
Okay.
They are going to test them on what they already know as a 3rd grader level, or are they testing what they should know based off 2nd grade?
No, they're testing them on what they would expect a 3rd grader to be able to do at the end of 3rd grade. So they're testing them on 3rd grade standards and content, reading and writing early in 3rd grade before they've had the vast majority of their 3rd grade
Like
instruction.
sometimes they've been in school like 4 days.
Well, it's in October, but
I thought some of them were already having tests.
are you so there is a diagnostic assessment. We do a universal screener at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
That's not a state test.
Okay.
I
Well,
know.
we
So-
report that. We report
Yeah,
that.
that's part of the improving K-3 literacy piece. So every child in the elementary takes a reading test at the beginning of the year. We use Acadience as our vendor, so all of our kids take an Acadience reading screener in the fall, and then they take an Acadience screener the fall of the next year. And what they're looking at there is, so for example, last year, 1st graders took a fall Acadience screener, and there were, I don't remember what percent, but let's pretend there were 35% of our students out of that 1st grade group that were off track. They were not on track in their reading. When those kids then went to 2nd grade, those kids who were off track, what percentage of those kids were we able to move to on track?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Kinda.
I'm just trying to figure if there's a
Yeah.
if there's a 3-week window, if you should move towards the back end of the 3-week window to allow for more time to get the kids.
So Annie
more
chose
knowledge
the
in.
last week of the 3-week window
Okay.
this year and we typically test our students across the district in the later part of that state window.
Okay.
Yep. To give more time.
That's good with the report card.
I think we're ready.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dr. Ritchie, do you want to just say what's the plan with filming or the live streaming?
Oh, well, I think, as I understand it, Tom Beck is just kind of doing a test this evening to see, what we need. It hasn't been, marketed greatly, but I think after tonight, we see, how it goes, and then probably at the October meeting, we'll do a little bit better job of marketing the link that we're streaming the video from. That's kind of the long and the short of it. I think that always, from what I'm told about these things, audio is always the thing that maybe is, you cross your fingers. But I think if we get that ironed out, I think the viewer at home will have a pretty good experience. What am I leaving out, Mr. Neely?
No, that's it. Testing 4 mics, is that enough? Volume mics, we need more mics. And we're going through West Milton Public Access channel, YouTube channel tonight. I created a Milton Community Schools DOE YouTube channel. As a second channel on our login account, but it takes, when we hooked up to it this evening, it takes 24 hours after you hook up for they'll approve your live streams. So we couldn't live stream our own channel tonight, so we'll be on our own channel next one. I'll make up a poster probably, QR code on it or something. Take a picture and do it on our phones, whatever, get some word out, YouTube channel, and test in some ideas, equipment, one camera, 4 mics, is that gonna do it? And then, this room versus, we go
I think eventually we probably have to have a plan for both, but,
We have to have equipment and use that.
Okay.
sound good?
Yep, thank you. All right, are we good to move forward?
I think so.
Okay. For treasurer's report, A, approval of the Board of Education minutes for August 19th, 2024 regular meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Kim Parsons?
Yes.
Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Mrs. Springvall?
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman?
Yes.
Motion passed 5-0.
B, approval of the August financial report. Recommend approval of the August financial report.
So move.
Second.
Okay. So over the last, the last meeting and then this meeting, there are going to be some approvals for example, alternative learning, another alternative learning placement, as well as some additional transportation assistance with getting those kiddos where they need to be. Specifically, we were talking about Mason at this time. So why am I saying that? So the last meeting you approved the bundled package for one kiddo. We do have another one that will be going down there as well. So why am I saying that? So some of these are coming in, the general fund, for example, is coming in a little bit under than what we had budgeted due to the fact, these unexpected costs, which can tend to occur. So you'll see the general fund balance we budgeted was 6.8. It was at 6.6 was the actual. The revenue was slightly lower, and I'll explain that here in a little bit. And then, of course, the expenditures were a little higher than anticipated. There's a few factors relating to that. So, going straight into the notes, we did receive a property tax payment. It was a little bit higher. The number that we used was what was conservatively what was collected last year. So last year, just under $403,000 was collected on that, and we came in about $66,000 higher. So I've already reached out to the county auditor on that to see if they can give me some trends. But of course, Chris Moore with K-12, who's helping me with the forecast, he's got his ideas as well. So I just like to kind of go, he deals with a lot of counties, so I would just kind of like to go straight to the source on that.
Quick question, why would we get additional revenue from property taxes?
So my preliminary thought, I want to hear it from the county. There might be some properties coming on the tax roll. I was trying.
Okay.
I don't know that for sure, but that was my preliminary guess.
And the reason I say that is I just want to clarify that because, there's a lot of misnomers out there about with the reevaluations of property taxes that we are receiving additional revenue on existing structures, existing homes. That is completely false, correct?
At this point, yes. And even if there was a little bit coming on, without hearing it straight from the county auditor's office, I'm not comfortable making that assumption.
But what I'm getting at is existing homes that have already been levied, we are not getting any additional funds beyond what was.
No, not at this point. Mm-mm. No, not until the reappraisal comes around. I forget what year that occurs in. So. The grants, the lines 1.035 and 1.04, the funding from the state, it is leveling out a little bit. I'll admit I'm no expert with it right now, so I do rely on Chris from K-12 to help me out with that. But I do like to see that it is leveling out, which could be an indication of it being on target, but we'll review it more in depth for the November forecast. Actual revenues as of August 31st were just 0.25% higher than budgeted. Under expenditures, line 3.01, personnel services, they were 7.4% higher than budgeted, and That is because the last pay for the teachers from the 23-24 school year is still built into that. And I erroneously, when I was creating the budget from month to month, separating it out over the 12 months, I kept those lower rates. I started them in a little bit too early. So again, the September amounts will realize those cost savings. Again, purchase services are going to increase due to several factors. For example, the alternative placements and the transportation needed to get them down there. Actual expenditures for the end of August were $80,000 higher, or 2.72% higher than budgeted in the May 5-year forecast. I do anticipate that will go up a little bit more just due to the needs that are being needed at this point. The district's ending cash balance was $6.6 million, or just slightly over 1.05% lower than the forecast. Sorry, just some words there. The cash summary report is pretty self-explanatory unless anybody had any questions. Again, those negatives that you're seeing on page 4 of the report, those PCRs are in place for the state to reimburse us for those grants. The investment summary, we did have just one of our CDs renew. I have been kind of taking a look at another investment group. I wanted to get my feet underneath me the first year just to kind of see what we can come up with. I know, Justin, that gets you excited. So as soon as I get some information from them, just to kind of take a look and see what he can do. Honestly, I want to wait to see what happens until November to take too much action on that. But it is in the back of my mind to kind of see what we can do here, maybe with some long-term higher percentages. So that is it for that. The cafeteria, it did see a little bit of a dip, which is consistent from year to year, just to with the expenditures being a little bit higher than the revenues, just to get things up and running. So we did see a little bit of a loss there in August. And then, of course, the disbursement summary for all the checks that were cut out of the district in August. You can see there. I do think that at some point we kind of need to start discussing what our plans are, barring the results in November. So I don't think we need to have the discussion right this moment, but we definitely need to kind of start seeing what we're going to do, how we're going to handle things going forward. I have been working on the 5-year forecast, so I think that's part of our discussion that we need to have, but definitely need to start those conversations.
Can you present the forecast to us maybe next meeting with where, if we pass, where we'll be, or if we don't pass in November, where we'll be, and what the deficit will be, and what we'll need to make up with cuts?
Very preliminary, but yeah,
Okay.
definitely can.
I think that would be good to discuss next meeting, so. All right, questions? Roll call?
Mr. Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Broombaugh,
Yes.
Mr. Kress,
Yes.
Mrs. Kim Parsons,
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman.
Yes. C, then and now certificate pursuant to section 5705.41 of the Ohio Revised Code. Treasurer McGill recommends approval of a then and now certificate in the amount of $5,110.20 to Adobe. It is hereby certified that both at the time of making of this order and at date of execution of this certificate, the amount required to pay this order has been appropriated for the purpose of this order and is in the treasury or in the process of collection to the credit of the fund, free from any previous encumbrance.
Yeah, kill it.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
So basically what happened here is we had Adobe auto renew on us and we did not have the purchase order in place for it, so, but this will be fine to cover it. Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Mrs. Kim Parsons?
Yes.
Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Mrs. Broomball?
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman?
Yes.
Motion passed 5-0.
5, other special reports, A, MUEA.
So I wanted to follow up with Treasurer McGill's question. She asked if the board is going to be discussing what would happen if the levy doesn't pass. And so if the board's going to discuss or get the information at the August meeting, by the time the November meeting comes around, the election will have already taken place. So is there a time in which you anticipate notifying the public as to what proposed, or I don't want to use the word proposed, I'm sorry, potential cuts might be, like was done in the spring?
I think it'll be a very, what's a good word for it? I don't want to say vague, but there's a lot of variables between now and then to consider, and there's not much meat on the bone to cut. So this one, not that the last one was not carefully considered, everything was carefully considered. This one's probably going to have to take a little bit more scrutiny than the last round. Am I speaking incorrectly?
No, I don't think so. I think, and I don't, certainly the board can comment as much or as little as they would like, but I think what I can gather, folks want to know what's going to happen. So levy passes, what do we get? The levy doesn't pass, what happens next? And those seem like simple questions to answer, but they're not. So I do think that if we're fortunate to have a positive outcome in November, there probably, I mean, would be a nice discussion to have. I think like how we scale up and what comes back, I think we have to be really careful about that. But I think there are some things that make some immediate sense, and I'm sure that there are some things that parents and families would want immediately. And I'm not sure how quickly we can do some of those things. I think how soon we can anticipate bringing new revenue in the district, I mean, that's a contributing factor. So, but I think to Mary's point, I think the community would want to know, when they're voting, what are we going to lose if it doesn't pass, and what do we get back if it does?
It's just I've heard from various community members saying, well, I didn't realize there would be that many cuts, and I didn't realize that this was going to happen. And I said, didn't you read what was in the mailers, and didn't you? So it was this idea of, I didn't realize it was going to be that bad. So just the idea of knowledge and information and going to the polls and being a more knowledgeable voter.
I appreciate you bringing that to the attention. Unfortunately, I think it's going to take a lot more work to figure this round out as far as what might, because like I said, we operate very lean. And unfortunately, when you make cuts, it hurts.
And last time the election was in March, and all the changes were going to happen within like 2 months, because we're not gonna, if it doesn't pass, we can't really make mid-year changes. So we're gonna have 7 months to really trim. I think we had a better handle on what we can cut last time, and now there's so little to cut. It's a little harder to have a handle on it. But I think hopefully we'll do our best to discuss.
When you start cutting a budget, you start with things you can live without, right? If you've ever cut your personal budget, and as you continue to cut away, they get more impactful and more painful. So I think we're at the stage where every cut now is impactful to the kids and to the community. And it would be in everyone's best interest when, if we have to go, hopefully we don't, if we have to go that route, that it's carefully weighed, not just for the dollar amount, but how much and how many it impacts. So I think, like Ben said, it's gonna take time, unfortunately, to hopefully get it right. So, I mean, I hope that we don't come to that, but there's not a whole lot, when you put them up on a whiteboard, there's not a whole lot left. You get really bare bones. So, that's just the state.
So the levy in November, let's say that it does not pass, and so no changes mid-year, because that is very difficult to do. And so the changes would not happen until the following school year. So what would you say to a voter that says, oh, well, if it fails in November, no harm, no foul, they'll put it back on in the spring, and I'll pass it then, it won't make a difference.
The longer we wait for additional funding, the more we go into the hole, and the more we're gonna have to ask for down the road to right the ship. So the longer we wait for additional funding, like I said, the more we go into the hole, and it's financially speaking, it's better to pass something sooner than later, because the less
We
we're
can
gonna
start
have. We
collecting.
can start collecting, and we don't have to ask for additional funds to, like I said, right the ship.
That's what I
I
thought.
think it
and I would
takes,
hear it directly from the board.
the more
That's
it's
what I-
delayed, the more you delay the collection process, which then flows through to the accounts to where you can see in arrears where the general fund balance is and plan from there. So you just keep delaying the additional revenue, so then we have to get ahead of it with cuts. It just snowballs on itself. The longer it delays, the longer it collects, the longer we see it and get it through, because everything you're looking in arrears, right? I mean, this is August, we're into September. So it just keeps pushing it down the calendar.
So if you think about it, if, hopefully we can get some positive results in November, the collections would start with income effective January of 2025. If we have to go into the spring of 2025, that is January of 2026 before collections can even start, and there's a phase-in of that. Like, my heart is beating right now because I can't believe we're talking about this, but that's painful for the 5-year forecast if we have to wait until this spring to pass something. And it's not full collections in January of 26. I forget what the percentage is off the top of my head, but that's not full collections.
And then we have a renewal next November.
Yes, a
So
PI renewal.
I don't think there's any chance of passing new money and a renewal next November.
Thank you. I just think that the public needs to know all that.
Yeah, we want to pass it in November to get it, the phase-in collections going, calendar year 2025. So then in 2026, right, Carrie? They
Yes.
would be in full, you would pick up the full amount of that additional income tax.
So we wouldn't see the full impact of it, because we already have an income tax in place. The likelihood of it collecting a little bit faster is a little bit higher. But it takes a little bit for an income tax to start phasing itself in.
Okay. Great. B, do we have anything from OAPSI?
OPSI member here.
Okay. 6, agenda confirmation. A, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Yes, we did add an item on the consent calendar. There was an additional supplemental pay for 5 teachers who attended some PD early in August. This amount was, I already have the check in hand, reimbursed by the Montgomery County ESC. So those have been added because it's outside of the contract.
Okay. B, approval of the agenda, recommend approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Brumbaugh?
Yes.
Mrs. Ginn Parsons?
Yes.
Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman?
Yes.
Motion passed 5-0.
7, old business. Anything? No?
Nope.
Okay. 8, new business. A, appropriations resolution. Recommend approval of a permanent appropriations resolution. Be it resolved by the Board of Education of the Milton Union Exempted Village School District, Miami County, Ohio, that to provide for current expenses and other expenditures of said Board of Education during fiscal year ending June 30th, 2025, the following sums be and the same are hereby set aside and appropriated for several purposes for which expenditures are made and during said fiscal year.
So moved.
Anybody?
Second.
I'm sorry, who said that?
Lori.
Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Mrs. Ginn Parsons?
Yes.
Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Mrs. Brumbaugh?
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman?
Yes.
Motion passed 5-0.
B, transfers, recommend approval of the following transfers. Transfer 3,383 and 81 cents from class of 2024 to class of 2028. Transfer 3,383 and 80 cents from class of 2024 to wrestling. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Why does the class of 24 transfer to wrestling?
That's what the president of the class requested.
Hmm.
So she requested half of it to go to class of 2028 and half of it go to wrestling.
Okay.
Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Mrs. Ginn Parsons?
Yes.
Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Mrs. Brumbaugh?
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman?
Yes.
Motion passed 5-0.
C, donations, recommend accepting the following donations. Hoffman Global Methodist Church for employee back-to-school luncheon, and $8,256.98 from Milton Union Facilities Association for parking vehicles at the Bob Schul Cross Country Invitational. We have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
So is the MUFA, is that a donation back to the school, and then as is half of what they earned for parking?
That's my understanding.
I'm not sure if it was exactly half. I just knew
Okay.
that it was that amount. Do you?
Does that go into the athletic fund?
Goes into the general.
General.
It goes into athletics. If you're going to ask me if it went into cross country, I don't know that off
That's
the
okay.
top of my head.
I'm just curious.
It goes into athletics in general.
Okay.
Roll call?
Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Mrs. Ginn Parsons?
Yes.
Mrs. Brumbaugh?
Yes.
Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman?
Yes.
Motion passed 5-0.
D, tennis court drainage project revised, recommend revision of resolution 2024-127 for approval of tennis court drainage project to be completed by S2K Excavating LLC, not to exceed $32,550 and paid with permanent improvement funds.
So moved.
Second. I'm trying to remember what the first
It was
20.
21.
21. So we've gone up considerably.
Yeah, they had 3 extra days of work. They told me they could go about 500 feet a day. And on the first day, they only got 65 feet because they ran into limestone.
Gotcha.
So it took 3 days longer.
Is the project complete? I
It is
assume.
complete.
And we haven't had any rain to figure out if this worked. So okay. Fair
The
enough.
depth that the only in one area, which was the lowest area, which is there behind the shed, that corner right there, because everything drains from back to front, and that was the lowest spot. So once they got through that, the drainage tile went higher and they were above the limestone. So just so happened to be the depth that they measured to put it at was also the depth limestone.
Hopefully it fixed it.
Yeah.
Mrs. Brumbault?
Yes.
Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Mrs. Gim Parsons?
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman?
Yes.
Motion passed 5-0.
E, alternative placement contract. Recommend accepting the contract with Warren County ESC for placement of 2 students in the Wellness Center program.
So moved.
Second.
Quick question. Once the kids are placed there, is it always the full year? Do they ever recommend they come back?
Well, I mean, that you always would hope so. That, I mean, that program, and Alyssa's here, so she could speak to this as well. But that program is probably as close to day treatment as you can get. So, I mean, the goal would always be that a student's least restrictive environment is ends up being the general education classroom. But, I mean, this program, again, it's the closest thing to day treatment there is. So, I mean, we're dealing with some, high-level student needs.
For those that don't understand, can you explain why we're placing kids in Warren County ESC in Mason?
Well, I don't know that you might have to take this one, Alyssa. I mean,
So basically, their needs are so significant that they do need that day treatment, as well as the resources in the area are just maxed out. There are no spaces available in the surrounding areas. When we're able to place them in those facilities, we have several on waiting lists, so that if something opens up, we are able to move them into a closer place if that's appropriate for their needs. But right now, there's just a lack of resources for these high-level needs.
So basically, it's finding a place for this person for the full day care because we are not equipped at our school to educate these kids. Thank you.
I have a question. Is there any grants or state funding that we can try to apply for to help alleviate the cost to a small district?
well, yeah, I mean, there's catastrophic costs that we would be eligible for, but, I mean, maybe a third of that we could reclaim. It would not be 100%. But there is a
That could help,
mechanism for
though.
us to reclaim something. Grants for student placements, I'm not really aware of anything like that. Doesn't mean that those don't exist. I've never seen it.
Because it'll be this piece and then the transportation piece too, correct?
Yes. Yeah, we are, that's part of the district's obligation is to provide transportation, yes. And when there's a driver shortage, and maybe not always just the driver shortage, but some of our classified staff members, they work in multiple classifications. So, to take one employee and have them take this route, this van route, it basically is, I mean, you're committing that person to the entire day when if they were here, they could do other work for us. So sometimes we have to go outside of our bargaining unit for support for transportation. But yes, that's part of the district obligation, yes.
Plus, it would take that vehicle or van out of use for extracurriculars and other students to transport locally.
Well,
Correct.
It definitely.
So it'd be it's a double-edged sword.
Yes, it would definitely take a van out of use that could be used to transport students to other locations throughout the school day and after school, yes. So a potential expense would be having to purchase another van.
Okay. Roll call?
Yes.
Mrs. Greenball.
Yes.
Mr. Kress.
Yes.
Mrs. Gim Parsons.
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman.
Yes.
Motion passed 5-0.
F, Elevate K through 12. Recommend approval of the Elevate K through 12 proposal to provide synchronous instruction to students currently enrolled in Spanish 2.
So move.
Second.
Is this instruction gonna happen in the classroom, or is it?
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, we still have to have some sort of supervisor in there.
Yes, it'll be the teacher,
The
the American Sign Language teacher. Will be in the room.
Okay.
And then the Spanish teacher will be provided, there'll be another teacher that will be providing synchronous instruction that, you know, that they'll. be on
Online.
Smart board, yep.
Okay.
How well does this work?
Well, we looked at a couple of alternatives, and this is a superior product. And why we felt like it was a superior product was because there was an actual living, breathing teacher that would be providing instruction during that period. So we have 2 periods of Spanish 2, where we're setting this model up for, and yeah, I mean, it's an actual instructor that will be working with our kids. So coach in the room is the American Sign Language teacher.
This is to alleviate the fact that we can't find a teacher to fill that position.
Correct. Listen, I mean, if we could have found a Spanish teacher, great. But finding a Spanish teacher in June or July is hard. And finding a Spanish teacher after the school year starts is next to impossible. So we tried to find the best educator, the best candidate that we could find, and regardless of what language they were certified in. So the best candidate was licensed in American Sign Language. And that's, I mean, you can make an argument for some world languages over others. I think the American Sign Language component is a nice opportunity for our kids. In this model with Elevate K-12 plus American Sign Language, we thought through how our kids can still maintain tracks towards receiving their honors diploma. One of the requirements for the honors diploma is to have 3 consecutive credits of world language, so Spanish 1, 2, 3, or you have 2 and 2, so Spanish 1 and 2, and ASL 1 and 2, or something else. So we think in this model, this plan, that we can maintain, but for those students that were seeking an honors diploma, we feel like they can maintain that track. So we hired the best teacher we could find, thinking that the best teacher we could find was going to equal the best experience for the students. Mr. Watson's been working pretty hard to make sure that the students and families that were affected by all of this have been communicated with. So we didn't send out a mass text or call to the entire district or even the entire high school, but the students and families that were registered, enrolled in Spanish 1, 2, or 3 were contacted. And he was in the classrooms talking to all the kids too.
And to clarify, next year, will we continue any Elevate, or will we,
Yes, we'll have to. Yep,
for Spanish 3?
correct.
Okay. And then after that, if,
Yeah.
you know, barring any changes in our staff, we would continue with ASL?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, so if everything works out, if it's a good experience for the kids and the staff member, of course, then we could continue with ASL. I mean, really, it's a long-term solution. Spanish 3 could be provided through Elevate. It could also be provided through CCP.
Wait, why do we have to continue this next year if we could find a Spanish teacher?
If there are students, if we could find a Spanish teacher,
Yes,
we might not.
right, we
I
might
mean, we
not,
might,
but if
I
we
mean, so
did.
we might continue with ASL.
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure that the district would be in a place to offer 2 world languages.
Okay.
So
I
having
think
A-
it's for the kids that have already started Spanish, right? It's the kids that have done Spanish 1. That would be the main reason to continue it?
It
So they can
would
get their
be-
3 years?
Correct. It would,
Yeah.
if we needed to continue Elevate, it would be for the students currently in Spanish 2 that need Spanish 3 for the honors diploma.
That you said that's also available through CCP?
Correct. Correct.
So if this is successful and the students are learning well, I mean, this could be a way to offer Spanish along with American Sign Language?
I mean, yes, I think we would have to pick our spots.
That is a budget thing.
Right.
You're paying extra, you're basically paying, well, not full double, but
No, it's not double.
This cost is probably, I was just looking at the math.
It's, so, I mean, it's expensive. You know, for 2 periods, I mean, it's expensive. But again, I mean, we could offer online curriculum that's self-paced through, say, Odyssey. There are others, but, I mean, it just, to me, it just, several of us really, it just makes sense that when you're learning a language, it helps to be working with a person, rather than.
Well, did the Spanish teacher that left, did she teach anything besides Spanish? Probably not, right?
No.
So I was just
Well, there
looking at
was
the
a-
World
cost.
culture.
There was
World
a-
cultures.
Yeah, there was a world cultures class as well, which,
Okay.
which the teacher, the incoming teacher can do, is doing.
I was just looking at the cost of the Elevate program versus the cost of hire another foreign language
Sure.
teacher, and it looks like this program cost is cheaper than hiring a physical Spanish teacher.
It would get, depending on how many periods.
That's why I
you-
said if it works well, maybe it
Sure.
would be
I
something
mean-
we look at downrange as an option to have more than one option for foreign language or.
And if we're offering this and the format online is in-person instruction, do we need to have a certified teacher in the classroom?
It just works out that way. It wouldn't have to be a certified teacher in the classroom. Like this year, it's just gonna work out that way. It could be a classified staff member.
but the operations budget would have to support that. Because I think right now the plan would be, we're eventually not offering Spanish.
Yes. I mean, again, unless,
This would be, if we added Elevate in all the time, we'd be increasing our operations spend.
but to your point, Justin, I mean, a
Correct.
period here or there, sure. I mean, it would be more cost effective.
Right.
And a way to provide kids access to potentially 2 world languages rather than 1. I don't know how long it's been or if the district's ever offered 2 languages. Do you know? Do you remember?
French, when I
Yeah.
first started.
Yeah.
We had French and Spanish.
You ready to vote? All right, let's go.
We gotta do a roll call.
Roll call.
Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Mrs. Kim Parsons?
Yes.
Mrs. Broombaugh?
Yes.
Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman?
Yes. G, additional transportation services, recommend approval of the contract with Senior Assistance, Inc. for transportation of an alternatively placed student during the 2024-25 school year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And this is to transport the previously described child to Warren County ESC.
Correct.
Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Mrs. Kim Parsons?
Yes.
Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Mrs. Broombaugh?
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
H, tuition. Recommend acceptance of the state-determined 2023-24 in-state student tuition rate for the Milton Union Exempted Village schools at $5,739.64 per year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And this determined by the state. We don't have any choice.
No.
I didn't think
They
so.
give me a spreadsheet and say, here. Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Mrs. Brunball?
Yes.
Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Mrs. Kim Parsons?
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman?
Yes.
Motion passed.
I, administrative reassignment, recommend the reassignment of Alyssa Coker from Special Education Coordinator to Director of Special Education Services effective August 1st, 2024 through July 31st, 2026, days 203, salary $83,093. Do I have-
So moved.
Second.
This is neither an increase in the number of days or an increase in salary. It's just a change, a slight change in title from special education coordinator to director of special education services. Just a change in title to an existing job description that the board's already considered, job that the board's already considered, one that has a job description, I should say.
Is this would be something like within the organizational chart? Is that what you're meaning?
Correct.
Referring from years back? And
Yeah.
we're just, okay.
Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Mrs. Kim Parsons?
Yes.
Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Mrs. Brunball?
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman?
Yes.
Motion passed 5-0.
J, consent calendar, recommend approval of all matters listed under the consent calendar. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Like Chris.
Mrs. Brunball?
Yes.
Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Mrs. Kim Parsons?
Yes.
Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman?
Yes.
Motion passed 5-0.
9, other authorizations and resolutions, etc. A, National FFA Convention, recommend approval for the Milton Union FFA to attend the National FFA Convention in Indianapolis, Indiana, October 23rd, 2024 through October 26th, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Brunball?
Yes.
Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Mrs. Kim Parsons?
Yes.
Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman?
Yes. B, Washington DC trip, recommend approval of the 8th grade trip to Washington DC with Class 6 student tours, May 13th through May 16th, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Mrs. Brunball?
Yes.
Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Mrs. Kim Parsons?
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman?
Yes.
Motion passed 5-0.
C, Program of Studies, recommend approval of the Milton Union High School Program of Studies for use during the 2024-25 school year revised.
So moved.
Second.
The only difference here is the addition of American Sign Language.
Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Mrs. Kim Parsons?
Yes.
Mrs. Brunball?
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman?
Yes.
5-0.
D, Resource Coordination Services, recommend approval of the agreement between Milton Union Exempted Village School District and the Miami County Educational Service Center to provide resource coordination services for the 2024-25 school year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is this what
Yes.
it is
Mhm.
right
Yep.
here that we were discussing?
Yep.
Second.
I'm sorry, who went first?
Lori.
Lori.
And again, this is at no cost to Milton Union. Just want to note that. Mrs. Kim Parsons?
Yes.
Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Mrs. Brunball?
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman?
Yes.
Motion passed 5-0.
Board member reports. A, Legislative and Student Achievement. I have nothing to report. B, Policy Update.
I have nothing to report.
C, Building and Transportation.
I'd like to open up my time for Curtis to give an update on the drop off, pick up and drop off? I've heard good things.
Yeah, so far, I mean, it's going smooth. I think our parents are figuring it out. And too, some people in line have said it's working well, it's gotten better. I think we've got a system going that we're going to try to sustain throughout the whole year. And, so far, so good.
Good.
What's the average afternoon time on the elementary side now?
21, 22 minutes from the time.
What was it last year?
It was probably 10 to 15, I would say. The staging of the cars is what, has added a few 7 to 10 minutes extra for, we're trying to get them in the order that they come in and get them out as quickly as we can. It's the continuous loop out front is what kept this, probably the speed for it. The staging over here is probably what's added the time. But, from the time Principal Blankenship starts dismissing to the last student, coming out the door, it's 21, 22 minutes. We don't have any traffic backed up on the road. If we do, it's 1, 2, maybe 3 cars. I would say 5 at most, and they're in the turn lane, so they're not obstructing traffic. Once it gets going, it moves pretty quick.
Well, we gave you a tough challenge and you've done a great job.
I appreciate it.
Agreed.
All right.
Chris, I have a quick question about pop machines
Yep.
in the teacher's lounge.
Okay.
Do you have any
So
update on that?
the timing was impeccable. I say that sarcastically. It was not a part of the budget cuts. Our contract with Coke expired 2 years ago, and they're just now getting around to pulling the machines. My guess is it was no longer cost effective for them to send someone here to fill the machines at the rate that it was being bought. I'm not 100% certain on that, but because they were still sending someone to fill the machines. I don't know at what period that was. If it was monthly, weekly, bi-monthly, I'm not 100% sure, but they just now got around to, and it was without any notification. The guy showed up and pulled all the pop out, and we were like, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "Oh, your contract expired 2 years ago, and we're finally taking our stuff." So.
Well, are we able to look at any other vendors?
We
and
are.
get a kickback
We are
as well?
exploring that option. Yes, we're trying to.
I'm just giggling about kickback.
Yeah.
So I think that-
We are trying to, and that's one of the things we're
Yeah, there's lots
looking
of
at
money.
is trying to find someone who will partner with us so that when they sell stuff, we may get a portion of that, or if it's there's a couple ways you can go about it. You can ask for a percentage of their profit, or you can charge them basically a rental fee to set their equipment there. Some of the ones we've looked at have, the equipment is no cost to us. They own the equipment. We're not responsible for filling it, servicing it, or purchasing it. All it is provides a service to our people in the building and some maybe to our students. We've explored that a little bit. It's putting something in for kids who may want to snack after school or before an extracurricular event, have the option to do that. But we have to meet certain guidelines. We can't fill it with junk food and pop. It's part of our wellness.
So what is our timeline?
I think we're close. It's more of constructing a contract and working out whether it's going to be a percentage or whether we're negotiating if the percentage or if it's going to be a space rental fee.
Don't we have contracts for all the concessions?
Yeah, but I believe that is since expired as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So technically, our concessions could sell whatever they can mix Pepsi and Coke if they want to. They're not obligated to just offer Coke. I think maybe we've stuck with Coke because that's what we've had for a while, but yeah, there's no obligation anymore. So we're close. We're trying to figure out how do you want to do this? How do you want to, I think that they're going the route of the percentage just because I think it's friendlier to both parties. I think you keep a vendor in longer if it's a percentage, because if you're charging a certain rental fee and they're not making that amount off of, what's being sold in your facilities, they're losing money essentially, and they'll probably end up pulling their stuff because it's not profitable. So if you go on the percentage basis, they're making a profit, you're making a profit, but it may change month to month or however you want to look at it. So, yep, it's in the works.
Okay, do we have anything from NVCTC? Okay. Milton Union Education Foundation?
The classroom grants have went out, and anyway, for the October meeting, we'll be reviewing all the applications and divvying out the classroom grant money to the teachers that applied.
Okay. Audit and Finance Committee? You guys? Okay. G, Facility Complex?
Don't have anything.
11, information and discussion items. Do we have any information or updates?
I think we've kind of hit things. as
Kind of
we've
hit it
gone.
all already. Yeah. Okay.
I
12.
will add the stair treads have been ordered. We're just waiting for them to come
Okay.
That will be over Christmas break.
in. Yeah, it'll probably be closer to winter time when they said 6 to 12 weeks. So.
Board announcements. Next regular board meeting will be Monday, October 21st at 6 p.m. in the Media Center. There is a WMUT meeting Thursday, October 10th, 2024 at 6 p.m. This one is at the West Milton Village offices. 13, executive session. A, recommend approval to adjourn to executive session for purposes authorized under BOE Policy 0166 and ORC 121.22G1 to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, and compensation of an employee or official, and ORC 121.22G5 for matter required to be kept confidential by federal law, rules, or state statutes. Invitees will be
Katie, Carrie, Curtis, me.
do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Whoa, what just happened? Jess was a first.
Give the other one to Justin.
Give it to Justin. Mrs. Broombach?
Yes.
Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Mrs. Kim Parsons?
Comes on, or they
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman?
Yes.